Picture, if you will, a Roman courtroom in 1612, where the air is thick with a heavy, decadent rot. A young girl of only 19 has her fingers bound tightly in a rope and wood torture device known as the Sibyl, a mechanism designed to crush bone with ease. The judge asks her coldly, "Do you speak the truth?" Gritting her teeth, her forehead beaded with sweat, she gasps, "It is the truth, it is the truth." She endures this agony not for any crime, but because she accused her painting tutor of rape, and the law of the era demanded that the honesty of a victim be tested through pain. This young woman, who defended her dignity amidst searing torment, was Artemisia Gentileschi. Tonight, by the flickering hearth, let us immerse ourselves in her true life through this story, one you need not labor to remember. She was the only female Baroque painter who dared to rival men, a revenger who fashioned her tragedy into a regal crown. Her life was more than a mere interplay of pigment and shadow, it was the ultimate reclamation of feminine sovereignty. Let us quiet our breathing and, in the gentle company of the night, slowly unveil the invincible legend of this queen of painting. The story begins in a Roman studio heavy with the scent of turpentine and raw linen. Artemisia's father, Orazio Gentileschi, was a renowned follower of Caravaggio's style. As his eldest daughter, Artemisia displayed a painterly intuition from childhood that inspired both joy and fear in her father. In an era when women were barred from art academies and forbidden from life drawing, her only teachers were her father and the four walls of the studio. Yet, she captured the play of light upon muscle with greater precision than him, and understood the shadows of the human soul more deeply than any man. However, driven by a protective urge over her talent, her father invited his friend Agostino Tassi to teach her perspective, never suspecting he had welcomed a wolf in sheep's clothing. Tassi did more than destroy her innocence, he exploited the prejudices of the age in an attempt to silence her forever. But Tassi miscalculated one thing: in Artemisia's very marrow flowed a stubbornness as unyielding as her brush. She did not merely sue, she chose to tear away the predator's mask of hypocrisy in a public trial, under the gaze of all Rome. That fury, emanating from the depths of her bones, became the indispensable primary hue of all her future works. If the trial was the inferno of her life, then Judith slaying Holofernes, born in its aftermath, was her manifesto of revenge delivered to the world. In this breathtakingly visceral work, she abandoned the depiction of frail, supplicating women in favor of a true wielder of power. Her Judith rolls up her sleeves, her gaze calm and resolute, as if performing a task that is physically grueling yet utterly necessary. The long sword slices through the enemy's throat with surgical intent, blood spurting onto the snow-white sheets. Every contrast of light and shadow in the frame vibrates with a suffocating tension. This was more than a biblical narrative, it was Artemisia's public execution of Tassi and the entire patriarchal judicial system upon the canvas. Utilizing a dark Caravaggesque background, she elevated this vengeance to a level of sacred, cruel beauty. The Roman nobility trembled before the painting. They had never encountered a feminine perspective of such raw potency. Yet, fame brought no peace. The gossip of Rome was a viscous mire, threatening to pull her back down. Realizing that true freedom required her to flee this place filled with the echoes of her agony, she married a Florentine painter shortly after the trial and embarked on an unknown path of breakthrough to the north. Florence, the jewel of the Medici, became the site of Artemisia's true coronation. There, she was no longer the defiled witness, but an artistic grandmaster of absolute brilliance. She became a voracious reader and befriended the great Galileo Galilei. They became kindred spirits, discussing the refraction of light and the laws of the cosmos. She began painting for the Grand Duke, and the female figures in her works grew increasingly diverse. They were the wise Sibyls, the resilient Lucretia, and the stoic Athena. In 1616, she shattered a 200-year-old taboo, becoming the first woman ever inducted into the Accademia delle Arti del Disegno in Florence. This meant that in the eyes of both law and art, she could finally sign contracts, purchase pigments, and own property independently, just as a man would. This was an exceptionally costly freedom, paid for with countless sleepless nights of creation and the loneliness of a stranger in a new land. Though her husband was mediocre, even squandering her earnings, Artemisia had long since learned to master her life as she mastered her canvas. Navigating the gambit of power and gold with ease, she became the most honored guest of the Medici. She once wrote to a patron, "I will show you what a woman can do." This innate aura of command left the European art world utterly awestruck. In her later years, though she traveled between London, Venice, and Naples, Artemisia's heart had become as still as ancient pool water. In London, she reconciled with her aging father, painting side by side with him on the ceilings of the Queen's house, a gentle acceptance of her family destiny. Yet her most moving moments remained those spent alone before the canvas. In her celebrated self-portrait as the allegory of painting, she depicted herself as a woman utterly consumed by the act of creation. In the painting, she does not look at the viewer, she no longer begs for external validation. She simply paints, conversing only with the vibrant oils. This ultimate self-immersion was the final destination after a life of turbulence. Art was no longer a weapon of revenge, but a sanctuary for her soul. In the damp twilights of Naples, despite the ravages of war and plague, she entered her studio every day to guard that inextinguishable light. She proved to the world that a woman harmed by her era could mend the flaws of reality by creating a more beautiful world. That fierce resilience kept her among Europe's most sought-after painters even in her 60s. She was no longer a victim, no longer just a survivor, she was the eternal pioneer who defined the soul of the Baroque. Around 1653, Artemisia Gentileschi passed away quietly in Naples, her death as mysterious and understated as her birth. For a long stretch of history, her works were often attributed to her father or her tutor, as if the world feared acknowledging a woman possessed of such wild talent. But gold eventually pierces through the dust. Today, when people stand before her paintings, struck by the intense chiaroscuro and raw vitality, we can still feel her breath. Her life began with a trial by torture but ended with the coronation of her own sovereignty. She speaks to every soul lying awake at night. All scars can eventually become the strongest totems upon your armor. Our story for tonight has concluded. Artemisia's ceaseless brush has left its deepest stroke upon the firmament of history. Now, please lay aside all grievances and weariness. Let your thoughts become as soft and stable as the light upon her canvas. In the depths of a dreamscape free from prejudice, where only art and liberty remain, you will find a peace that belongs solely to you, undefined and absolute. Good night.